Welcome to another episode of RTD News, and today I'm excited to bring you some interesting articles from around the web. And as you can see from my background, it has to do with currencies that are at war. To my right, I have the Japanese yen, Chinese renminbi. To my left, I have the Federal Reserve note. And so right now, there's a big trade war going on. And so once it hit mainstream media news, that kind of tells me that it's already old news, and so it's already underway. So just to give you an idea of what a trade war is, or a currency war is rather, I'll look here on Wikipedia, and it says it's known as a competitive devaluation, a condition in internal affairs where countries seek to gain a trade advantage over other countries by causing the exchange rate of their currency to fall in relation to other countries. So basically, one country's trying to get a trade advantage on the other to make it more, I guess, to stimulate growth in their own country. So got about 7 articles here. I'm going to dive through each one of them and just give you a little bit of each on the surface, but yet I'll put them down below for you to do some more research for your own if you're interested. And so let's get into today's articles. All right, so the first article here is from Business Insider, and it's entitled, "We're Entering the Next Phase of the Currency Cold War." Next article from Nikkei Asian Review, it says, "Will Trump declare a currency war?" Next article, "China's currency policy approaches breaking point." Next article from the Weekly Standard says, "China currency gains have been helping, not harming the dollar." The next article is from Daily Reckoning. It says, "U.S.-Chinese relations speed towards rupture." And then the next one here is from Market Watch. It says, "It's premature to worry about a currency war, the IMF says." And then the very last article here has to do with the Indian currency crisis there. And this is from NPR. And it says, "What can India teach us about abolishing high-value currency?" So we'll get into that. So let's dive into the first one briefly. I want to cover just a little bit on the surface and then leave it below for you to dive more into it if you're interested. So just to give you an idea of what's going on here, it has a picture of the yen, the pound, and the dollar. And so it says one of the most interesting and for many observers, surprising market developments year to date has been the gradual descent of broad trade weight USA dollar. It says, "As always, in currency space, it's hard to tell, though one thing is clear. The new U.S. administration is not interested in a strong dollar." Witness U.S. President Donald Trump comments that the dollar is too strong against the Chinese yuan and it's killing us. And the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro's recent allegations that Germany is using a grossly undervalued euro to exploit its trading partners. These comments shouldn't come as a surprise, at least not if you believe in my theory that we have entered a new, as he put it, cold currency war. Cold wars are not fought in open battle, but with covert actions and words. In a PIMCO blog post in December, the author of this blog here says, "I explained how the European Central Bank and the Bank of Japan and the People's Bank of China opened the cold currency war through guarded actions that contributed to the depreciation of their currencies against the dollar during the second half of 2016. So he goes on to lay a little case for that. And it says here, next one is de-escalation. So where do we go from here? In the logic of a Cold War, it would not appear to be turn of China, Europe, and Japan to respond with covert action that weaken their currencies again, or at least prevent them from strengthening through further against the dollar. Yet quite the opposite has happened recently. China fixed the yuan stronger against the dollar after the Lunar New Year, and the ECB has been quietly dropping hints that it may abandon the downside risk to growth. So once again, it's a guy here from PIMCO, which is a trade hedge fund type of operation there, basically leaving his comments on the idea that we are already in a Cold War, and it started back towards the end of 2016. So articles below if you're interested in reading more about it. Next one, will Trump declare a currency war? So it has a young man here counting a $150 bill, and it says, "U.S. President Donald Trump has a simple criterion to judge whether America benefits from the international trade. Is America exporting more than it is importing? He applies this criterion country by country. If the U.S. has a bilateral current account deficit with a particular country, then it follows that this country is taking away jobs from America. For some nations, such as Mexico, he threatens to respond by imposing a tariff. For others, he accuses them of manipulating their currencies. This opens up a new front in the still simmering currency wars." And then it says, in 2010, Manteiga, then Brazilian finance minister, warned that a currency war was underway. Europe, the US, and UK were attempting to boost their limp post-2008 recoveries through quantitative easing policies, which lowered interest rates and depreciated their currencies, he noted. This phase of war petered out quite quickly enough when when Japan's Abenomics in 2013 achieved a marked weakening of the yen through its mix of fiscal stimulus, monetary easing, and structural reform. The G7 countries were quick to defend their policies. So he's basically hinting at, back in 2010, the Brazilian financial minister basically hinted at the idea that he saw, a lot of activity happening, which kind of triggered the currency war based upon the Fed's response to the crisis or the recession with quantitative easing, or as I like to call it, legal counterfeiting. So articles below if you're interested in reading more about it. Here we have from Bloomberg, it says China currency policy approaches a breaking point. So this came out a day or two ago, and I'll basically just touch the top of it. It says in his first weeks in office, Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and confirm his intention to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. China has weathered such criticism for now, but if Trump's threats of trade sanctions and 45% tariffs become real, the economic impact for the world's second biggest economy would be meaningful and could upend financial markets, potentially leading to a global recession. With economic growth already slowing, the capital fleeing the nation, China's 11 trillion economy is operating from a position of weakness. So here it shows a little graph of how the Chinese slowdown economy declarates as debt builds, and so basically shows that how their economy has been slowly but surely over the last 4 years or so slowing down. And so they're basically saying that if Trump, sticks to his guns and impose all the tariffs, which is going to cut into their ability to generate revenue, it's going to be a major problem for the globe, not just China itself. So there's more there if you're interested. Scroll through. And so here we have the weekly standard. China's currency gains have been helping, not harming the dollar. And so it's a quite lengthy article, so I'll just basically touch on the top of it. But it says the United States conjure the world's primary reserve currency. Valéry Esténage, the French finance minister and later president, remarked half a century ago. This privilege, maintained as the dollar took the place of gold, allows the United States to be deeply indebted to the rest of the world while earning far more income abroad than it pays out in interest. Less well known as a mirror image of exorbitant privilege. We call it exorbitant detriment. Rather. It is not surprisingly borne by the world's largest holder of U.S. debt, which is China. Having run persistent current account deficits since the 1990s, the United States has accumulated a net debt to the world of $7.8 trillion. China, by contrast, is the world's largest net creditor to the tune of $1.7 trillion. And so that has to do with, the fact we're pumping out paper debt. They're pumping in goods and services. We would expect countries that are net debtors to pay out more income than they receive, and those that are net creditors to earn more income than they receive. And indeed, this holds for most of the world. But for the United States and China, the opposite is true. Despite its vast debt, the United States earned $180 billion more in foreign investment income over the year September 2016 than foreigners earned on U.S. investments. The unique financial position of the United States can be explained by the willingness of foreigners to accept a trivial return to hold dollar-denominated assets. So they're basically saying that, the rest of the world don't mind, holding our treasuries and our debt because it has, some form of value in and of itself. It says China's exorbitant detriment is, to some extent, the price it bears for being on the other side of the transaction. Foreign exchange reserves account for half of China's foreign assets, of which around 40% are invested in low-yielding U.S. treasuries. So yeah, it's going to be quite a long one there. But basically, they're trying to hint at the idea that the trade deficit, it benefits, both of us in some form or fashion. So I'll let you read the rest if you're interested. Next article here from Jim Rickard says U.S.-Chinese relations speed towards rupture. And so if the guys that aren't familiar with Jim Rickard, he's a big international author / insider that kind of gives a good point. And he looked like he's bringing us from his book, The Road to Ruin, The Global Elite's Secret Plan for the Next Financial Crisis. And so here, just to give you a little bit on the top, it said, based upon my reading of recent developments, U.S.-China relationships could soon be heading for crisis. The process of connecting the dots between political, economic, and social forces buffeting China is complicated. By using a technical analyst and information I've gathered on the ground and a recent visit to China, I'm able to cut through the haze and political rhetoric and propaganda coming from Washington and Beijing. The way I can bring you a reasoned estimate of what the near future holds in store for the markets as the world's two largest economies, China and U.S., work out their differences for better or for worse. In 2016, we know that China, the world's largest second largest economy, defied predictions of a slowdown by unleashing massive amounts of government spending and adding mountains of debt to stimulate its economy. But I expect 2017 may turn out very differently. China is encountering hurricane force headwinds that will cause its non-sustainable debt-driven policies to reach a critical state. It says the first challenge is that Trump is plain spoken, does not hide behind unusual diplomatic babble. That can be difficult for Chinese to tolerate because their culture is dominated by the concept of face or the need to avoid direct conflict or embarrassment. And it says President Trump and President Yi, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, are on a collision course involving issues of trade, tariffs, and currency manipulation. It says China's response to the conflicts mentioned above might take the form of a massive devaluation of the yuan, much tighter capital controls, and a severe downturn in its economy, or all three. So basically saying that the presidents of China and our new president here might end up bumping heads one way or another, being that we're kind of all in the same game, dependent upon each other. And with Trump talking big, we'll see how the Chinese respond. So there's more to this article below if you're interested in finding out more for yourself. Next article here. I think this is quite funny. It says, it's premature to worry about a currency war, IMF warns, or says rather. So it has a picture here of IMF leader, Christine Lagarde here. And so it's funny to me that once it hits Market Watch, I mean, it's already something that she's already prepared this speech for and probably actually worried about. And so I'll just read through it briefly and see what she has to say. But of course, let you read the rest for yourself. Worry about a potential currency war in the wake of President Donald Trump's inauguration is premature, a spokesman for the IMF said Thursday. I don't see evidence of firm policy decisions made that would lead us to suggest that they were heading for currency wars. So I think this would be premature. Experts have expressed concern that some comments from the White House could lead to a currency war, especially if Trump White House follows up tough talk with action to weaken the dollar. It says Stephen Roach, a senior fellow at Yale's University Jackson Institute of Global Affairs and former chairman of Morgan Stanley Asia, told Market Watch there was a lot of concern in markets about a currency war in light of rather hostile comments from the White House with respect to trade policies in Mexico, Japan, and Germany. So clearly the IMF, they're keeping an eye on this. They're one of the bigger world body policy makers that kind of, oversee and monitor things. But yet, if they're mentioning that there's no concern that there's a currency war brewing, then that lets me know there's already one brewing more than likely, and they're just trying to soothe things out to let the public know that everything's going to be fine. But yet, trade will be an issue in 2017. And so here's my last article. This has to do with the whole Indian cash removal of their high denomination notes and then implementing an even higher note into the system, which has caused a cash crisis. And so it says, what can India teach us about abolishing high value currency? So it shows here a group of people trying to get to the bank, I assume to either withdraw or to deposit their banknotes that were expired as of the beginning of this year, end of last year. And I'll give you an idea of what's going on here, but definitely this is a subject, if you're not familiar with it, I'll advise you to check into it because it's one of those things where it's the government there, they're really trying to impose and prepare the idea of a cashless society where they remove cash, physical cash, and basically force the citizens to operate solely on digits in the form of whether it be payphone, cell phone, or any type of automatic accounts that someone doesn't have access to cash with. So just to give an idea here, it says ever since Genghis Khan used tree bark as legal tender and backed it up by threatening anyone who didn't use it to death, governments have manipulated paper currency to suit their purposes. When India abolishes high-value rupee notes last November, it sought to rein in hoarders of big bills who evade tax. However, the move sucked so much cash out of the circulation that it destroyed the wage of millions of Indians who earn in cash and deprived millions more of access to their money. If it seems radical, it turns out a lot of countries have considered scrapping big bills as well. Benjamin Franklin, the founding father who extorted the virtual paper money, graces the $100 bill, which Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff sought to retire. But instead, he says the $100 bill has been growing as a proportion of all U.S. currency in circulation. Then he quotes him as saying, and that's pretty much true across the advanced economies, where there are huge amounts of cash that's been printed, but most of it's in big bills. And it goes on to quote Rogoff here. And I've done some prior videos on his book, The Curse of Cash, and how he kind of proposes it's time to begin moving away with the big bills first, all the way to the small bills, and replacing it with some form of a digital currency. So it goes on to talk about, it's what's some of the advantage of having cash. It promotes human smuggling, drug trafficking, fraud, illegal flows of money, things, yada yada yada. More spiel the government's trying to lay on us to convince us that it's a good thing to remove our personal property in the form of cash. So this is today's articles. And so, as always, if you guys enjoy these articles, I want you to share them with family and friends so they become more monetarily aware, as well as take some time and to read through these articles for yourself to get a better idea of what's going on with this trade war, aka the currency war. And also, for those that are new, if you haven't had a chance to go to RTD University to check out a lot of the interviews I've put together, a lot of the gentlemen I speak with deal on issues such as this and how it would all end. How it all come to an end, rather. So once again, thanks for your time. If you're new, click the subscribe button, share this, help me get the word out to help people become more monetarily aware. Look forward to bringing you more news. And also, if you haven't, check out my interview with Mark Faber. Great conversations, a wealth of knowledge, and it was a great time talking with him. So hope you enjoy that as well. Other than that, see you next time.